We're Roger always called this guest Chazz with the 2 Z's. Help me welcome Chazz Palminteri. I love the Ebertfest audience. We have a tradition here. We give a golden thumb, and this is actually was modeled after Roger's thumb, and it's made by the same people who make the Academy Award. Chazz, will you please accept the golden thumb? John, we'd like to give you a golden thumb as well.
Thank you very much.
Roger would be very happy that the 2 of you are getting these thumbs. So, there you go. And now we'll take good care of the thumbs for you while you're on stage. We'd like to bring out 2 of the best and well-known film critics in America, Leonard Maltin and Richard Roeper.
Yes, it. Welcome to All That Chazz, ladies and gentlemen. How about it?
I wish you people could see what we're seeing right now. This is such a beautiful theater, and it's really mind-blowing to sit on this stage and look out at all of you here.
If only there were some sort of device that we could use to take instant photos of a crowd and then transmit it to movie lovers across the world. Wouldn't that be something?
You're so sharp. You're so sharp.
Leonard, please start.
No, I have to say, I haven't seen this movie since it came out, and I remember vividly seeing it in 1993.
Yes.
And I cannot tell you, Chazz, how often I think about it, because specifically because of the relationship between the father and son. I think about it a lot. I think about De Niro talking to his son about being a working class father and what it means to get up every day and go to work. And but the way everything he does, everything he says to his son is said with such tenderness and wisdom, sort of, street wisdom, commonplace, everyday wisdom that he's acquired through his life. And it just moves me so much, and it moved me all over again tonight.
Well, my father, Lorenzo, my father was a bus driver. His name was Lorenzo, obviously. And he was, thank you, and he was, a lot of the words that I wrote in the movie are my father's words. I mean, he used to always say the saddest thing in life is wasted talent, you know. And he actually said that to me when I was about 10, 11, when a great fighter, Billy Bellow, from the 60s, was found with a needle in his arm right on my rooftop, and he died, and my father cried, and he said to me, don't waste your life, son. You have talent. I know you have talent. Don't do what Billy did, you know. So, I promised him that I wouldn't waste my life and do something with it, and it worked out okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's such a beautifully written piece of work, and there's the economy of words where there's so much else going on. And Leonard and I were talking backstage a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of memorable scenes, but that one scene when the little guy is just 9 years old and his father hits him, and the way he jumps into his father's arms. 9 is about the last age where a son will still do that with his father, and you could see the struggle even then with the little boy. He wants to be a man, and he wants to understand what being a man is, but he's still his father's baby boy.
You know, it's funny, Richard. When Bob did that scene, I was behind the camera, and as I was watching it, I just went right back to my dad and what really happened. And Bob De Niro came over to me and said, you know, how was it? You know, and I said, it's the best scene in the movie. And he goes, oh, yeah, stop. And I said, no, I'm telling you, it's going to be the best scene in the movie, because I just knew it in my heart, you know, that the way they both did it with such passion, and it was just great, you know. But it's one of those movies, and I always say, people always ask me, how did it come out so good? And I go, you don't know. It was a great script. We had a really, you know, a lot of people don't know, but John Kilik is really one of the great producers today, and he really held this movie together. And I have to thank him so much. We went over budgeted a few times, and John made it all work. And you know, as a producer, you're there for the director and the writer and everyone. And John really made, as much as I had to do at Bronx Tale and De Niro, so did John. So it's one of those things where the producer, the director, the cast, the script, everything just comes together, and that's what happened. So it was great.
Now, John, can you tell us about finding that remarkable little boy, Francis Capra? He's so great in this film.
You know, so many things about this movie felt like divine intervention. Mm-hmm. They just kind of happened. We stumbled across so many things. And, I mean, I just want to say, to start it off, I'm so happy everybody's here, and so happy Chazz is here. About a year ago, Chazz, Ebert, and I saw each other in Cannes, which we normally do whenever I'm there with a film. And it's been 25 years since we've been meeting there. And I've been meaning to come to this festival since it was started. And last year, Chazz said, you have to come, you have to come. I said, this year I'm going to do it. She said, well, what's your favorite film? If you could pick any film you've done over the last 30 years, what would it be? And I told her it would be A Bronx Tale. And it's just been, for so long and for so many reasons, such a special movie, and I treasure it so much. I'm so proud of it. And to see it tonight on a big screen with a great audience just meant so much to me. And to have Chazz here and all of you, just thank you all for being here.
And I know,
but just to answer Leonard's question, you know, I remember the story.
When Francis came in?
Well, you go ahead.
We were auditioning little boys, you know, and it's really hard to find a little boy with really, like you said, Leonard, chops. You know, it's really good, you know. And all of a sudden, one day, this kid walks in, you know. And walks in, he goes, hey, how you doing, Chazz? Hello, Bob. I mean, that's what he said. And Bob said, and me and Bob kind of looked at each other, and I'm saying, look at the set on this kid, you know what I mean? So he goes, we go, okay, you want to read the script with me? So I did the reading with the people, and Bob watched. And I said, all right, well, Francis, you have the script? He goes, nah, I don't need it. I said, you don't need the script? He goes, no. And just before he starts, he goes, hey, Bob, you want me to cry or not cry? I swear to God. I'm telling you what he said. And Bob said, you know, if you feel like crying, go ahead, you know. And I did the scene with the kid, and the kid he was great. And then he walked out, and I turned to Bob, and we looked at each other, and I said, well, I guess that's it. You know, and there was really no one even close to him. You know, other kids came in, but he was so above and beyond everyone else. He got the part, you know.
Wow. What a find.
Yeah, I know.
You might as well tell him about Lilo.
Well, Lilo, you know, there was this kid called, you know, the opposite story, but if you look at the boy at the end who shoots me, his name was Philip. I forgot Philip's last name. He had the role of C. He was supposed to be C. But 3 weeks before we was about to start shooting, someone walked in and said, hey, I found this kid on Jones Beach. You should take a look at him. So we looked at this kid, which was Lilo, and I said, wow, you know, he looks more like you, Bob, than his real father. You know, I said, because his real father eventually came in with him, and I said, this kid looks just like you, Bob. And he came in and we screen tested him and Phil, and we chose Lilo because he was a little younger than Phil, and he looked so much like Bob, and he was terrific, you know. So, yeah, go ahead.
That, you know, a little more detail, and I know it's a long time ago, but we had Phil, and Bob wasn't quite sure. So, of course, Bob always, when he's not quite sure, keep trying, keep trying. So he had us continue the search. We were searching most of the film, except for Chazz and Bob and Joe Pesci, unknown, not only unknown, but not professional actors, most of them. And so a lot of the roles were found. Some Chazz brought, some of the real guys from the neighborhood.
That really was Eddie Mush.
And but the leads we had to find, and Lilo, the way I remember it, Chazz recommended somebody who worked at the Belmont Theater up in the Bronx to go out and be our scout and go out and look for actors through the theater company and also just out on the street. So he goes to Jones Beach and he sees a kid and introduces himself. He's got his little camera or something and says, would you maybe read for a movie? We're casting a movie. Who's in the movie? Well, Robert De Niro. We're looking for the son, a kid to play the son of Robert De Niro. And the guy says, oh, no, you don't want me. You want my brother. And so the kid leads the other guy to his brother, who was at the other end of the beach. And then the brother is Lilo. And he started doing, right there, impressions of, he knew every line from Mean Streets, Goodfellas. And just, how does this happen? And so many times, I would just look at Chazz, and the way we found the church, or the way we found the street, or the way we found Lilo, or friend, it was just like there was some kind of little
divine.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've always been very lucky and blessed. I don't know, and I remember Bob saying, "Well, what about Eddie Mush? You know, we couldn't find an Eddie Mush." So one day Bob looks at me and goes, "Well, what about the real Eddie Mush?" So I said, "I don't know, Bob." I said, "The guy's a jinx. I don't know if I want him in the movie." So he says, "No, I really want to meet him." So I said, "Well, if he's anywhere, he's probably at OTB, you know, off-track betting at the time." I said, let's go up to the Bronx and maybe he's up there. So we get in a limo, we shoot up to the Bronx, and sure than hell, Eddie Mush is standing in front of the gambling place, yelling at people, you know. I go, oh, I said, there he is. So I get out of the car and I walk over to him and I go, hey, Eddie Mush, how you doing? So he goes, hey, how are you? He goes, hey, I hear you're making a movie, right? So I said, yeah. I said, listen, Eddie, just be cool. I said, come over to the car. I said, don't say nothing, but Bob De Niro's in the car. He goes, you're full of shit. So I said, no. Mush, I said, Mush, listen to me. Bob De Niro's in the car. He goes, I ain't going over to no strange car. I owe too many people money. So I said, please, Eddie, come over to the car. So he walked over to the car, and I tapped on the window. And Bob rolls down the window, and he looks at Bob De Niro, and he goes, holy shit, it is you, you know? So to make a long story short, Bob says to him, listen, Eddie, I want you to come to my office next week on Tuesday at 12 o'clock. I want you to read for the part of Eddie Mush. I want you to read, right? So now picture this. Robert De Niro asks you to come and read for his movie. This is what Eddie Mush says to him. 12 o'clock? He goes, could you make it 3? So Bob says, Bob and I start laughing. He goes, Eddie, sure, you can make it 3, but I'm just curious, why do you want to make it at 3 and not 12? And Eddie Mush says, because I'm going to Aqueduct and I want to make the double. And Aqueduct was the racetrack. He says, I'm going to the racetrack and I want to make and so he went, go ahead, just go. And Bob turned to me and said, come on, he's perfect.
Now, this started
Imagine the casting call, the other guy's waiting to read for Eddie Mush, and he walks
Yeah,
in.
right,
Well, I'm
right,
not going to
right,
get this effing job.
Now, this started as not just a play, but a one-man show, right? Which I've never had a chance to see.
Right. I still do the one-man show. I do it at Foxwoods, or I still do it in Vegas. It started as a one-person show where I did the whole movie on stage by myself. That's literally what I do. I do the whole movie on stage. I play all the characters, everybody. And it became like the hottest property in the world at the time in 1989, 1990. And everybody wanted it. And I got offered over $1 million to just turn it over to the studio, and I refused. And they said, well, then it's not going to happen. And I said, well, forget it. So it started with $250, $500, $1 million. I said no. I had about $200 in the bank at the time, and I still said no. And then finally, after I turned down $1 million, a week later, Bob De Niro walked into the theater and saw it. And I met him backstage, and he said, this is the greatest one-man show I ever saw. He goes, that's a movie. You did a movie on stage. This should be a movie. And I says, yeah, but I want to be in it. I said, I want to play Sonny, and I want to write it. So he said to me, well, he goes, I'll tell you how I feel. You play Sonny, you write it. It's about your life, and it'll be real. I'll direct it. I'll play your father. And if you shake my hand, that's the way it'll be. Shook his hand, and that's the way it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry, but I just want to roll back a little bit and get into a little more detail on that too, because there's the great part of that story. The success of the story is a beautiful story. But what I love when I go to film schools and talk to kids about this movie and your story, I actually start with what you were going through before and when you wrote it and where you were at the moment and why you wrote it and the inspiration for writing beyond your family, but your class. Can you just talk about that? Because I always bring that up.
Well, what happened was I left New York and I went to LA quickly, and I was acting there, and I got hot right away. I was on Hill Street Blues, if you remember that show, and Matlock and Dallas and a bunch of those shows. But then after I did all the guest star roles, I ran out of money again. So I said, wow, I got to do something. So I got a job as a doorman at a nightclub, because I used to bounce in New York when I was younger. So, but I boxed, though. I got a job as a doorman, and I was working there for 4 months one night. And then one day, this man comes over to me and says, "Let me in." I said, "I'm sorry, sir. What is your name?" He goes, "I'm not giving you my name." He goes, "You don't know who I am?" And I said, "Excuse me, sir. When a guy starts off with 'You don't know who I am,' it ends bad. So you shouldn't say that." So he says, He says, "You'll be fired in 15 minutes." I said, "Oh, really?" So I said, well, I'm not letting you in, and I won't be fired in 15 minutes. So sure in hell, he starts yelling, and the owner comes out and yells, "Swifty." And it was Swifty Lazar. Now, Swifty Lazar was the biggest agent in the world at the time in 1989. So what happens was I was fired in 15 minutes, just like he said. So the boss said to me, "Look, I love you, Chazz, but I got to fire you. He has too many parties here." I got in my little beat-up car. I went back to North Hollywood in this little dump that I was living in, and I saw my father's card on the, I put it on the refrigerator, and it said, "The saddest thing in life is wasted talent." I said, well, if they won't give me a great part, then I'll write one myself. And I got 5 tabs of yellow paper, and I started writing about my life. When I saw this killing, the way you saw it tonight, that's exactly the way it happened. I was sitting on a stoop. The man, he killed him right in front of me. He stared at me, and my father came down and dragged me upstairs. Exactly the way it happened, just like that. And then, I wrote Bronx Tale for my class. I did 5 minutes, and then each week I would write another 10 minutes. And
This was an acting class?
That's the part I wanted to get to.
Yes.
That's the part that I retell.
Yes.
You were in an acting class.
Yes.
Everybody had to do their little monologues.
And I did Bronx Tale.
I hope
each week.
I'm getting it right. That's why I want to confirm.
No,
it
you're
here with
right.
you.
And I would do it. I would write 10 minutes and do it from an audience. And then I would keep 3 minutes out of the 10, 2 minutes out of the 5. And at the end of 10 months, I had exactly what you saw there tonight.
Wow.
I'm just real curious, how many people were seeing this movie for the first time tonight? Oh, probably
Oh, wow. Quite a
more
few.
than half. And
That's a lot.
you know, and it's 20 years ago, and you know, unfortunately, a lot of the things that are happening in the conflict there are still happening today. It's one
Yeah.
of these things, and one of the things I love about this story is it's a Bronx tale, but it's an American tale. And you know, the first half of the movie is, you know, there's sort of a romanticized look. It's 1960, and Mazeroski and the Pirates upset the Yankees in Game 7, and it's not a simpler time in some ways, but it through the eyes of the narrator it is, because he's younger, and it remains a Bronx tale, but the world around the Bronx starts closing in, and the way it develops into, without being a message movie, but a much bigger movie about so many bigger problems. And I'm just wondering, during the making of the film, how do you balance the storytelling and the artistry and wanting to be a success with also getting those messages across?
You know what? It's a very good question, Richard. You know, I read these books where Leonard Cole, who wrote this book called The Moral Intelligence of Children, about what Bronx Tale means and about good and evil, and it was gray. It wasn't really about good and evil. It was gray and gray. And he wrote all these beautiful metaphors. And I went, wow, I didn't know I was that smart. You know what I mean? But the reality is, I just wrote a beautiful tale from my heart about my life. If you set out to write messages and stories, you know, it never happens. You just write something that's honest. And when you see this movie, it's really honest. You know, I remember, I just want to clarify one thing right now. I dated a black woman when I was 17, not Bob De Niro, okay? Everybody thinks it's Bob De Niro's story about the black girl, that he put that in. And I say, excuse me, no, it wasn't. It was my story. I dated a black woman when I was 17. I fell in love with her. She fell in love with me. And in 1968, that was kind of rough. But it was, you know, I thought I would talk about it because I didn't have that kind of hate that some of my friends had. And so I just talked about it, and it's still very relevant today. And Bronx Tale is huge anywhere all over the world. So, you know, I'm just happy that I happened to touch on these characters. They're kind of archetype characters that it works, you know.
John, so at what stage were you hired? And tell us about Robert De Niro deciding to tackle his first film as a director. And he's only done one since then. Another good movie, The Good Shepherd. Yeah.
Well, I was first contacted by Bob's partner, Jane Rosenthal, our co-producer on the movie. Bob and Jane had just started Tribeca Films, and the Tribeca Film Center was literally just being built at that moment. But Bob, I think, had an itch to direct for a while, and they contacted me because I lived in New York. I had just done Do the Right Thing and maybe Mo Better Blues. It was 1990-ish, or 90 when I was first we didn't make the movie for 2 or 3 years, but Bob promised Chazz that he was going to do it, and even though it took a while, and Bob and Jane needed a partner to bring it together, I met with Jane first and met with Bob, and we just all, you know, got along, saw it the same way, and a partnership emerged from that. But it didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen easily. The studio that actually had produced Do the Right Thing and had bought the rights for Bob for the play was Universal. And when we were ready to make the movie, they decided they didn't want to make the movie. And we went around to all the studios, and none of them wanted to make the movie. As great as the play was, it was still, just like it is today, maybe not as hard as it is today, but pretty close. It's hard to make a movie of your own making, something that you, the talent, the filmmakers, want to make that's an original piece that isn't part of studio development. And as much as they wanted to back Bob as a first-time director and this play that was so successful, there was still resistance. Period, and some of the issues in it were challenging, I guess, the way the studios looked at it. We found eventually the financing through a combination of Savoy, who had the domestic rights, and an Italian company that took on the foreign. And we patched it together. Universal allowed us to take it in what they call turnaround. And it took a few years. Bob would make another film. We'd go spend time with Bob on the set of whatever other film he was doing. He did 2 or 3 before we were able to make it. And we just all hung in there and made that commitment to each other that it was going to happen.
Tell us, I want to ask each of you to tell us your impressions of him as a filmmaker, as a director.
Well, Bob never, he never directed before. In fact, it was really amazing because every big director in Hollywood wanted to make it. And I met with them all. And people were saying to me, even my own agents, you're not going to do it with him? And, I won't say who they were because they were great directors. And I just didn't feel anything, I didn't feel it was right. And some of them didn't want me. They wanted to put a star in the role, so I wouldn't make it with them anyway. But when I met with De Niro, we talked about it, and the way he was just so, he said, look, I love the story. I won't touch the story. The story should be the way it is. And there was an honesty about Bob. There was a truthfulness. And he says, I know the milieu. I'm from there. I know Little Italy. And I just felt, I looked in his eyes, and I said, you know what? I don't care that he's never directed before. He's going to make a great movie. I just had this feeling inside of me. He's an artist. He did all these movies with Scorsese. He had to learn something, I thought. The way some of these agents were talking, like he was a guy who just came off the street. Yeah. Well, he's never directed before. I said, I don't care that he's never directed. I know he could do it great, and I just went with it.
The thing that I found really amazing about it, first of all, when Robert De Niro calls you up and asks you to produce with him his first film, I'm still pinching myself. I still can't believe it happened. As my friends from my neighborhood, New Jersey, said to me when I told them Robert De Niro called and asked me to produce his first film, they said, well, you don't need to, win a golden statue. You just won it. That's the prize, the greatest actor. But what I really, so the myth was all incredible, but the reality was even more incredible because he has a process, and I'm sure it's his process as an actor. It was the same process as a director. He's a perfectionist, and he went about every detail, not only every actor that was cast, but as I said before, the film, every shirt collar, every shoe, every. It had to the 16th of an inch.
Yeah,
every detail of every set. We met every cameraman. For the music, Chazz and I and the music supervisor would literally sit with Bob at his apartment every weekend, pretty much, in pre-production, during the shoot, and after for a year of editing. One weekend, the guy brought in, I'll never forget this, the whole collection, 40 years of Tony Bennett.
40 years.
We listened to every song, 40 years.
And after that,
I'm glad he didn't make it today because it'd be 65 years of Tony Bennett
and
songs.
the words Bob said, after 40 years of listening of Tony Bennett, Bob turns to the guy and go, is that it? He said, is that it? And we were like, oh, God, no.
We would, back then you'd shoot on film, and a film magazine has 10 minutes of filming.
Right.
And there were many times where we would do a scene. Bob would be behind the camera if you were in it, or Lilo or whoever. He'd just whisper like,
yes,
keep the camera rolling, and do a take. He'd get out, whisper something.
Yeah, he doesn't like to cut, right.
And keep the camera roll, and we would shoot the same setup
for
the 10 minutes of that camera roll.
You know the scene when she lifts the car door, when she lifts the door? 31 takes. She lifted it this way, then she went this way, then she went that way. Then she went one finger, then she went 2 fingers. And then after we watched 31 takes, Leonard, we're sitting in the editing room, and Bob goes, which one do you think? And I went, 1 and 2. So he got mad at me. I said, 1 and 2. I told you 1 and 2.
Every frame of the movie was just...
Well, the production design is impeccable. It is impeccable.
It is, yes.
I mean, you really think, I grew up
there
around that time, and it's, it's a time trip. It really is.
Yes.
there was a lot of evolution in that too. We drove the production designer a little crazy. They all come in with their own ideas, and getting to Chazz's point about the honesty of the film, we found this incredible street, again, another divine intervention that was built. The church was built
By the same
year
architect.
by the same architect
Right.
as the church on the corner where Chazz lived. We couldn't shoot on the same corner where Chazz lived because it had gotten built up and changed, but this block was preserved a little more and
Right.
less commercial. But the production designer who actually did do the right thing in some of Spike's films was our designer on the movie, and he wanted to do, I remember, the basement. We got in a big fight because he wanted to build a set. You can't do a scene like that on location because the real basement underneath the club had a ceiling that was about maybe not even 6 feet.
Right.
And so we went down the basement, maybe to show him that it should feel like this. And he, well, we can't shoot here. And Bob, and the bathroom, the ceiling height. Bob had an expression that just came back to me: let your obstacles be your guide. There were always things that limited us, but he made them special and made it work. Nobody would build a set with a 5-foot, 10-inch ceiling.
Right.
But that is the kind of thing that just was honest, and it made it special, and it just made it all feel so real.
And all those guys are real guys. I mean, Bob, we had to see so many actors because it's hard to find guys who could really be natural actors. But Bob, every one of those guys you saw were real guys from the street.
And proof's in the pudding because I don't remember seeing those faces in other movies.
No, they never been in other movies.
Yeah.
Well, because they weren't actors. They were like, they would come over to Bob and I and say, hey, Bob, like when you shoot a scene and then you have to come back tomorrow to continue the scene, you're in coverage, so you have to come back. So they would say things like, hey, Bob, I don't know if I can make it tomorrow. I'm supposed to go with my wife to see her mother. What, are you kidding? You got to be in the movie. You got to be in the movie. You have to come back. So they would do things. The crap game, when you saw the crap game, Bob he had to use real money. Okay, so at the beginning of the first day, we had $1,200. We passed it out to everybody. Bob said you had to use real money. So at the end of the day, the set guy comes over and says, listen, Bob, we're $400 short. So I have to go to everybody, and I say, listen, guys, we're $400 short. You can't do this, Oh, we're sorry, so I got $200 back, so now we're $200 short. So the next day we shot again, and we were $100 short. But they couldn't help themselves. They're thieves, some of these guys, But finally we got all the money back, so it was crazy.
That's fantastic. You know what? We got time for just a few questions. I know we got a few folks here with microphones. If anyone's got a question, just raise your hand and we'll get...
Raise your hand, wait for one of these nice folks to come to you with the mic.
To your left.
So we can all hear the
To your left.
question.
All right, we'll start right here. He's got the microphone, then we'll come right over here there. Go ahead, please.
I had a question for Chazz. This was about 20 years ago. I first saw this movie right here in Champaign, actually. And my two favorite scenes were the crap game and the aqueduct thing. And you kind of answered the question already about Eddie Bush being a real character in real life, which I thought was ironic because my friends and all, we would use that on people we knew who were mushes in the same sort of sense. And then I thought, when I was watching The Sopranos, Lilo Brancato was in that, so I knew him from your movie, of course. And then I thought how ironic it was that, talk about wasted talent, and then he was the one who said that, of course. I don't know if everybody knows his story, but maybe you can tell people about that. But thank you.
Thank you.
It's the best question ever. Just like, thank you.
First
Please.
of all, this is the first time I've ever seen this film, and I loved it. It was very real and very funny at the same time, so thank you for making this to begin with. I noticed a lot of the song choices really stuck with me. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the use of music in the film.
Well, about the music in the movie. It was really Bob's idea, who said he wanted each character to have their own music. So as everybody was fighting between the black and the white and the older and the younger, each one had their own music that they would do. and he thought the music should fight as much as everybody else did. If you notice, when I get in the car, there's right there listening to rock music, then R&B's playing. So it really worked. I mean, that was really Bob's idea who did that, and it worked very well.
Did your dad in real life really listen to jazz?
Listen to jazz on that little transistor radio.
Yeah, uh-huh.
He used to put that right behind him, and I would sit behind him. I go, "Hey, Dad, come on, you got to listen." And he would say, "Hey, you don't know good music, you know," just like you sing.
Where are we looking now?
We have a question in the balcony, to your left a bit, up in the balcony.
Hello.
Hi. I wanted to say thank you for coming. This is very exciting, even for me, and that's about my 6th or 7th time seeing the movie, and I loved it. One of the questions I had 3, has already been asked. The first one was about Terrell Hicks. How did you find her, and do you know where she is? And I was going to ask about the music, how much influence you had in picking the music, because it was perfect. Thanks.
Well, he's kind of indicated the music was chosen very exactingly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a lot of research. Like Chazz said, Bob had an idea of the feel, but to get into the specifics of it just took time, which is what he does. He just puts in the hard work and the long hours. So it was, and Bob is, I wouldn't call him a music aficionado. So
No,
he
just,
you know, some directors I've worked with, they know every song. You know, you
Right.
have Spike Lee or Quentin Tarantino. They keep a running. Bob knew this world and knew the period, and that's why we all, you know, followed and trusted and
Right.
understood the material. But the music, that's why we spent so much time with it, because he wanted to hear it. He knew the songs, but just dug very deep into it to get the right ones.
And a lot of those songs were from my youth, growing up at that time. The Four Tops and all those songs were from my growing up. You know, when I was on a date, was listening to the Four Tops singing, you know, those songs.
And it wouldn't be an authentic New York Italian movie without Sinatra and Dean Martin on
Without
the soundtrack.
Sinatra and Dean Martin, right. And
And
Terrell
Ahmed.
Hicks, to answer that other question, Terrell Hicks came in, and, you know, a lot of people, they wanted to use a black girl who was more, maybe, you know, to be honest with you, more half white, half black. But Bob and I, we didn't want that. We wanted the black woman to be a black woman. It was important that she was a black woman because that's what she was. You know, she wasn't half and half, or, you know, she was a black woman. And that was really important to me and to Bob. So we found Terrell Hicks, and she came in, and she's a great singer, too. She's teaching now in New Jersey. That's what she's doing. But a wonderful, talented young lady and a terrific actress.
There's a hand over there. Is there a mic over there as well? Oh,
Down to your left.
We have one right here.
Oh, okay.
Chazz, when you were introduced, most of the people stood up. I did not, because I wanted to stand up now and thank you personally and professionally, because for me it was a very rich film in so many ways. But I want to particularly thank you professionally. When teaching English to sophomores, Niccolo Machiavelli, the prince, you need a hook. I thank you for the hook.
The hook. You're giving them a hook to teach.
I showed that clip, Fear and Love, and
Yes.
so on. And I want to know how that came into the film.
Yeah. You know what? I used to talk to the guy. His name wasn't really Sonny, but I'll call him Sonny. And we talked one day, and he used to say, you know, he was away in college a few times, as they say, you know. And he said, "What do you do in college?" He says, "Nothing." When he means college, you know what that means, you know. So he said he would read a lot. See, the thing about Sonny that was so amazing, Sonny could have been my father could have been Sonny, because they both had great minds. But Sonny told me that he would read Machiavelli, and I had no idea what that was. 500 years ago. But a lot of the wise guys, some of them, like Sonny, he would read it. People ask me, what makes a great wise guy? And there's two things. You got to be tough, but you got to have intelligence. And Sonny had intelligence. He could have been a CEO of a company, but that was his company, you know. And he talked about Machiavelli, and he studied Machiavelli. And I found that to be really interesting, and I always remember that. And that's why I put it in. And I like to read Machiavelli. He was ahead of his time.
We have a question right to your right, down front.
Short dress. I love your movie, and first time I saw it was like 15 years ago. And so my question is, a lot of the dating jokes were what got me when I was like a freshman in high school. So the head down and the semi-truck thing, and locking the door, unlocking the door thing. But really overall, sort of the arch of just masculinity and the flaws of masculinity. Perhaps even like 25 years after the creation of this, but was that your intent in creating this film, or is that just like seeing it later on of like constructing masculinity in general, of like how men figure out their place in understanding each other?
Did you?
I'm so glad I don't have a microphone right now. Thank you very much.
She's talking about the role of masculinity in the film. And that particularly interests her and intrigues her, and she thinks it holds up very well after 25 years. It's still relevant. Am I quoting you, I hope I'm not misquoting.
Yeah, and if I'll try to help as well. I mean, I think, and there is a lot, the notion of what it is to be a man, and of course you have with two father figures, his biological father and Sonny, and his father constantly telling him, there's a big difference between being feared and being respected. And what it really means to be a man is to get up every single morning at 6 o'clock and work that back-breaking job for your family.
And then there he is at 17 years old meeting this girl, and it's the first time he's had these kind of feelings, we assume. So does this extend beyond your own experience? Do you think there's something more to that in the film?
I think so. I think what makes this movie hold up so well, and why some people, they call it a classic, is because all the characters are archetypes. Everybody's been there before. You've been where Lilo has been. You've been where Terrell has been. You've been where my father has been. You can recognize, you feel something inside of you when you see these people. As far as the masculinity goes, these were these guys, some of these guys would hate black people, and I would say, why? Why would you do that? And they would say, well, you got to. And there wasn't a reason. The reason was, this is our neighborhood, we're poor, and this is ours, and we don't want anybody here. So it wasn't so much, and the black guys were on Webster Avenue. When we went there, they felt the same way about us. So it was this constant back and forth, and that's why even today it's relevant.
But good point, because there is something else that, can work on something for years and then live with it for decades. And still, a thing about art is when you can still watch something and find new things and new meanings in it. And even for me, the thing that you were talking about with the stories and the story about the guy in the semi, there's a surface bit that you get, but in watching it now, for me, 25 years later, it's just remarkable the intimacy that you were able to achieve, to tell something that's so private, and yet everybody's kind of heard it, but nobody would ever say it.
Exactly.
There's something about that that's just a magical thing that very rarely happens in film, or even publicly, that private moments can become public, and you kind of, that's uncomfortable, but it's so real.
Yeah, well, Chazz used the word honesty before. I think we all recognize the truth when we see it and hear it.
Right. Well, here's the thing. I'm sorry, Chazz, but I mean, characters in Shakespeare's plays don't know they're characters in Shakespeare's plays, and as you're watching this film, as it unfurls, it's Shakespearean in the hugeness of some of the ideas. You have the star-crossed lovers, you have the feuding families, you have the father-son conflicts. But if the characters are aware of that in the movie, then you've got a problem, because then the movie's hitting everybody over the head.
Exactly. I didn't know all these things when I wrote it. I just wrote from my heart. What really happened to me and how I felt with my father, and in my mind, I just was like somebody else wrote it. I was just going like that. It was a gift from God that came down. And I tell everyone, if you love the movie, you really should see the one-man show because the show is really very a visceral feeling because when you see it, because I am the guy, I am Calogero, you know, and it's weird because when I see it, I play. Not only was I the writer, you know how hard it is when you're a writer and you give it to a director. I was the writer and I played all the parts. So to me, it was everything. And I had to see people do my words and go, wait a minute, I didn't do it like that. That's not the way I did it. You know, so I had to really pull back and watch it. But fairness to Bob just left the script alone and said, do it the way it is. You know, he didn't change it, which was great.
It sounds like he also included you in other ways, too. You're talking about listening to the music.
Oh, every way.
Being a second pair of eyes for him when he was in a scene.
Yes.
Editing room.
Editing room. I was in the edit. It was very collaborative.
You know that many writers get cut out of that process.
I was involved in everything, in everything. Well, Bob De Niro used to say, and it was a thing I never forgot, and anybody who's an artist out there should listen to this. What he said was, I said to him one day, I said, Bob, you know, you got me involved in everything and you listened to my ideas. I said, I really have to applaud you for that because usually people as big as you don't want to hear it from the writer. And he looked at me and he said, Chazz, it takes just as much talent to recognize a great idea as it is to come up with it yourself. And I never, ever forgot that. So he wasn't threatened by me. So if I came up with a great idea, and he recognizes that was a great idea. He felt I have the same amount of talent as you have because that was a good idea. So I never forgot that, and it really helped me when I started directing myself that I never felt threatened by anyone's idea. I mean, John came up with great ideas in the movie, and if Bob and I liked it, hey, John, that was great, and we did it, you know. So we were trying to find the scene about when he walks out, Bobby Bars walks out of the bar and goes like this. We couldn't fill that space, and Bob came up with an idea, it wasn't that good, and I came up with an idea, and it was not that good, and we didn't know how to fill that space. And the guy flipping hamburgers was hearing us talk, and he said, hey, Chazz, you know that thing you're talking about, that thing over there? And I said, yeah. He goes, why don't you walk out the door and say back, hey, what number's leading? You know, when they do that, I went, that's a pretty good idea, Bob. And he went, yeah, that's pretty good. That's better than what we came up with, and we put it in the movie, you know. That's how it is.
That's smart.
Yeah.
That's smart.
Just one more question.
Upper balcony to your right a bit.
I grew up approximately 7 blocks from the place where the movie was filmed, and 25 years earlier. And in my day, the social tension was between the Italian neighborhood and the Jewish neighborhood. I fell madly in love with a young Italian woman, and we sneaked around for 6 months, and the social pressures were just too much. But I'm very curious to know, you mentioned that you had to move the actual location. What's the precise street where the house was that these folks lived in? Do you remember?
The house where I lived or the house where we shot?
The house where you shot.
Gee, I don't remember that.
Because I know that neighborhood very, very well.
Yes, I don't remember that. No, I don't. Okay. You remember, John?
32nd Street and 34th Avenue or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Wasn't in the Bronx then?
It was in Queens.
It was in Queens.
Ah, okay.
We couldn't shoot in the Bronx because it was too built up there, and I would have had too many partners if I tried to do the movie there.
I'm crushed.
They all
by
said,
that.
well, you know, you can shoot the movie here, but we got to talk about it. I was like, oh, no.
I remember one of the days, it might have been the first day we ever went up there to scout, just you, me, and Bob. And
Right.
I think somebody drove us. And you said, oh, don't worry, we'll just go and look at the real house, and see so we'd know what we were looking for when we're trying to find it. And nobody's going to bother you, it's all going to be fine. So the car pulls up, and Bob didn't even get out of the car.
Didn't get out of the car, right.
And somebody yells out,
hey, De Niro.
the greatest actor in the world.
The greatest actor in the world, Bob De
There's the
Niro.
greatest actor in the world, Robert De Niro.
You know, it was unbelievable. I mean, but we were blessed. We had a great team behind us. Eddie Mush didn't jinx the movie, which I was happy about.
And
We're
just
all
one more
grateful
thing,
for
though.
that.
Getting
We're all
back
grateful
to
for that.
you mentioned it about the lessons that you tell people, and I just wanted to say one last time about how you did this alone on a blank piece of paper, coming home from your acting class, when everybody else was doing their monologues, you went home and said, I'm going to write my story, and I'm going to perform my story, to take that blank piece of paper and start writing it down. That's what I always refer to. That's the American dream. When Stallone did it, when you did it, I mean, that is just such an inspiration, and really the biggest thing about it that makes this all so special.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm very proud of it. I'm proud of growing up an Italian American. You know, a lot of people talk about the mafia, but the mafia is just as aberration in the Italian American community. The real community is the working man, the baker, the bus driver, the truck driver. And I wanted to say, hey, this movie is not Goodfellas. Goodfellas, one of the great movies, The Godfather, one of the great movies, but that was about the gangsters. This is about the working man. It takes just as much strength, you know, to get up in the morning, to pull, you know, it doesn't take much strength to pull a trigger, but get up in the morning and feed 3 kids. That's what my father used to say. So I was very proud of my dad and very proud of my mother and father. And it's because of them is why I'm here and why I wrote it.
And they were very proud of you.
Wow.
Well, thank you.
Unlike Mush, I think we've been very lucky to have these folks here tonight and to see this beautiful film on a screen again. Thanks to John Kilik and to Chazz Palminteri,
Thanks so much,
and to my
gentlemen.
buddy Richard Roeper.
Thank you.
And
Thanks,
thank you
everyone.
all.
Thank you.